Greetings, Mark Rang again. This is part 2 of our discussion with Peter and Bill from the Municipal Budget Committee. So we were just talking about, on the break, we're talking about all these unfunded, not unfunded, but these positions that aren't filled but are still in the budget. So explain a little bit about what that means.
Well, my simple approach to that, without getting into the weeds, is that year after year there are not a small number but a relatively large number of positions that are budgeted for, not filled, and then budgeted for again. And I'm going to say I believe that this has been a phenomenon in this sort of quantity for 3 years running now, at least.
Many of those positions are special ed, and we're told, and I have no reason not to believe, that we're mandated to at least advertise for those in order to demonstrate an effort to try to meet the federal regulations regarding special ed, but many of them are not too. There are a number of teaching positions and that sort of thing, custodians that are...
So what's the result of that? They build it in a budget, obviously that's millions of dollars, so it's not going to be spent, then what?
Right. Then it goes into the unexpended surplus, the fund balance, as it were.
Right. Is that bad or good? Or doesn't it return to the taxpayers?
Well, if they return it to the taxpayers, it's good, and for years they have boasted of their generosity in returning our own money to us, but now they want to keep at least $1 million out of this year's surplus for special projects, and keeping those unfilled positions in the budget allows them to maximize that sort of balance.
I will add to that I feel it's a case of wanting or having their cake and wanting to eat it too. Is that the idiom? Anyway, on the one hand, yes, it could, the unfilled positions could and often do, to the credit of the administration, land in surplus. I want to remind everybody, though, that the district's budget, as it is with the school budget, they're bottom line budgets. If there's an expenditure that occurs during the year that was unanticipated, whether it's excesses in special ed, if a boiler blows up, any of those things, they have the right to use those unexpended funds so long as they don't exceed their total budget. And I say wanting it both ways because at the same time they're always pushing to either maintain or to add to capital reserves that are set aside for unintended expenditures. Right? Well, not when they have it both ways, Mark. If they've got some slush on the fund balance side and keeping positions posted that don't get filled ensures that, and then they also have the ability to dip into capital reserves. I know the special ed has a capital reserve fund that's in the amount of about $400 and some odd thousand that has never been used. And I'm going to just say that the ravages of inflation for those hard-earned tax dollars that were put into that capital reserve fund from many, many years ago have reduced the value of that hard-earned taxpayer money because it has sat there unused for all these number of years.
And yet, although it's for the unexpected emergency, we were told that even in the one instance over the last quarter century where they thought they were going to have, they had such an expense that they thought they were going to have to dip into that capital reserve fund, they didn't. They found that fat in the budget.
Mm. Yeah, well, I know Jack Cuddy, when he was running for selectman last year, that was one of the things he said about the town, is that why is this money just sitting there? If we're going to have money sitting there, why don't we just get a high interest money market fund or something like that? Where does the money sit, do you know?
That's a very good question. One of our members this year initiated an investigation of some more detail about that, because those CRFs sit and are the responsibility of the trustees of the trust fund. And we, for the first time, got, at least in recent memory, I haven't seen this before, we got an accounting of all of the CRFs and expendable trusts from all entities, which include the town, the school district, the water precinct, Kearsarge Lighting, and geez, I thought there was one other. But anyway, all of the amounts are on there, all of the balances. A cursory check of those funds determined that the real rate of return over this last year was somewhere in the vicinity of 2.5%, which is not awesome.
No, it could be
But that's
4,
all I'll say
right,
about
just
that.
sitting anywhere. It could be 4.5 or
Sure.
so, but sure. Now, so has the school board made presentations to the budget committee yet? Have you started? You've had?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, we have.
We've
Sure,
had
we have.
two
We've had
meetings.
two.
Okay,
Yeah.
2 meetings. So Amy Fichette's doing that, right?
Yeah.
She
She's
is.
leading it. So what do you, this is a little bit of a loaded question, but there's been a lot of turnover at the administration, Jim Hill, Kevin Richard,
Yep,
Amy's
yep.
in there now and all that. I mean, and that's tough. I mean, I sympathize with them because, boy,
Agreed.
these are tough, the finance officers new and all that.
Yes.
I mean, what's your sense of how much the administration has it together? It's a loaded question. I realize.
They certainly have a hard row to hoe, and I have no doubt of Amy's competence. Frankly, I've watched her as a teacher, as a principal, and particularly as a director of theatrical events. And she's very thorough, very competent. She gets people to do what needs to be done. My only question is if whether the bureaucracy of this SAU has reached and perhaps has been at a level for some years where no one person can really get a handle on it. And I don't mean more than one person should. I just wonder if it's simply too big a bureaucracy.
Gosh, I mean, heck, we just got a new president. He's going to turn things over, and we're going to have people get CEOs of, big giant companies. I think one person could make a difference in a $40 million budget.
Our last president was going to do a lot too. I'm disappointed with the SAU mostly because of the SAU leadership. None of the money spent by the SAU is ever voted on by anyone except the members of the SAU board. And I think because they don't have to be held accountable to any voters, they have a tendency to be overgenerous. And I think, I guess I would blame the chairman and the vice chair of the SAU for having, for instance, been extremely generous in determining what the salary offer would be for a new superintendent. I don't know where else you decide what the next person, the new person's going to get by taking the salary of the man who's been doing it for a decade and adding 25% to that for the starting salary. That doesn't sound very.
But that happens. I think that happens in business all the time. People are there and they're in their job, and it is, and all of a sudden, in this environment, if it hadn't been in a tight labor market, then that person might get less money. But I don't think that dynamic is that unusual.
The person that they offered $40,000 more than Kevin was getting was simultaneously applying for a job in Michigan that paid about $50,000 less. So a little research on the part of the chairman and the vice chair might have told them that more what her expectations were, and they might have given a.
Then how do you account for, if that's the case? Then Ms. Bechet, who's the curriculum coordinator, she's getting $120,000.
Yeah.
I mean, how? That to me seems, again, it's not about her credentials or the job, but that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, period. And it's particularly a lot of money in this town when you're not the CEO or making these big decisions.
And that has a lot to do with the attitude on the SAU board toward giving over generous salaries, I think, to keep or draw people. Last year, I think it was last spring, they issued a number of phenomenal raises under the guise of market adjustments. and one, I can't remember her position at the moment, but our former special services director got a 13% increase just this year. Another person who was the third person to hold a particular job in a short period was getting 28, 29% more than the person 6 months before. And I don't think there was any.
Peter, do you have any sense on salary and market competition for people, these skilled people?
I won't comment on that. I will say, though, that it doesn't take an awful big jump to see why at least one school district is looking at leaving and forming their own SAU, due partly because of what they're paying to this SAU 9 for what they get. So that's a concern.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, pardon me, that I'll remark, because you started with questions about the administration, Mark. I've met with Amy several times. She's highly competent, energetic, enthusiastic. She's a real pleasure to work with. I am concerned, though, that her efforts are being stifled by the amount of work that she's having to do right now. And some of those efforts would include other sorts of advocacy to find other sources of money, that would occur through advocacy at the state level, things that superintendents normally do, and things of that nature. And whatever her core initiatives are, I don't think we could possibly know what they are, pardon me, because I think she's so buried by the day-to-day now, is my sense.
Why
and
is there
and that
more
concerns
day-to-day
me.
now than there ever been?
Well, because at least at the SAU, Jim Hill has retired. Mike Wade has taken over many of Jim's duties. Mike also has duties as the comptroller,
Right.
as the fellow who is principally in charge of the finances for the school district. They are short an accountant. I'm going on what they have advertised
Right.
for. I believe they have a business administrator that they're searching for as well to try to fill some gaps. I think, again, Mike Wade is doing an amazing job with what he has to work with. But I'll say again, I'm concerned about the way this is going, because a lot of the information, and not their fault, I want to make it clear that I'm not faulting the administration for this, but we have information that we need to decide on what sorts of recommendations we're going to make before the voters that we don't have now. And I hope that everything works out so that we get it in time so that we can do our jobs.
Wow. Speaking of the SAU, I mean, Bartlett-Jackson, I guess there's going to be a special article on the Bartlett warrant about combining Bartlett and Jackson.
Yes.
And, which they could leave. If that's the case, they probably would leave the SAU. You have the Northland Woodland, which basically has the number of kids that could have filled up John Fuller, right? 150 kids down here. So that's competition for the school.
Yes.
What happens if, I guess Tamworth, some of the kids may go to Moultonborough?
Right. They had a pilot project where I believe they sent 10 kids there last year.
So what happens if this happens? I mean, with the SAU contract is coming up, when, in 2 years or 3 years?
27
yes,
will be.
that's the deadline.
Yeah, okay. So what happens if Bartlett-Jackson leaves? I mean, all of a sudden, Bartlett and Jackson, they're not happy, and I don't blame them, because they pay way more per student than Conway does, because the assessment is based on the number of kids plus your valuation of all your property. And
Right.
Bartlett-Jackson has a ton of properties, we know,
Yes, indeed.
and not many kids.
Right.
Well, it strikes me that we're already, we will see our taxes increase in Conway if all of those students leave, because more of them will be our responsibility. But it strikes me that we're already seeing that probably in our district assessment in Conway, which would explain why over the last 2 years the portion of our property taxes that have been devoted to paying just for Conway's district assessment have risen 29.4%, at the same time that the town portion has risen 3.3%. Part of that has got to be a change in the proportion that Conway is paying. I guess it's not an opportunity for me to say I told you so, but when we were first talking about building the new high school, my thought was if we let the sending towns take care of themselves, Bartlett and Jackson in one way and the other towns in another, maybe keep Albany and Eaton, we wouldn't have needed a new high school. A much less ambitious project would have been accommodated the students
So
we
there's a
had.
little bit of empire building, you're saying? Back then?
The empire began, yes, back then, and it frankly it does seem like an empire. I mean, the very idea that while students are melting away from enrollment, they're padding the staff with people, more people. It suggests that you know, a cynic would say, oh, they're trying to get more people who have an interest in the schools who will vote for the budget, and maybe that's happened.
Yeah, Peter, what do you think? I mean, if Bartlett Jackson, I mean, at some point it just does it collapse in itself?
Worst case scenario, perhaps. Right now, Conway's contribution to the $40 million plus or minus proposed budget is somewhere in the vicinity of 50%. So if folks are doing the simple math and seeing what the school portion is of their tax bill now, paying only 50%, imagine 60, 70, 80% of that budget being shifted back entirely to Conway taxpayers, and you know, will that mean that we finally will see more of the tax base show up at the deliberative after we've done our
Whose charge
work?
is it to convince Bartlett Jackson to stay with us? Is it the school board? Is it the SAU board? Is it like, how does that work?
The board, right?
Well, yes, the board is their committee is negotiating. I don't know that it is, though, their duty to, as it were, to convince them to stay. I think they need to determine each of them what their best interests are, and I frankly would not be. I couldn't blame Bartlett, say, or Jackson for going somewhere else. Obviously, going to Freiburg, for instance, would be an onerous daily grind for the students.
It's only another 10 minutes
Really?
from the high school. Yeah, I mean, 12, 13 minutes, but it's not that far.
Well, one thing we tried to do when we were looking at closing a school was keeping the bus rides under an hour. And you make it an hour and 15 minutes, that's a half an hour extra a day.
Yeah. You know, I sit in my office up here and I look on Main Street, which on CV Street, and that's pretty much what I do all day is just look out the window. And I see those
Really?
buses go by and there's like 2 kids in them.
Yeah.
Why can't we have smaller buses?
We're told that because of the consolidation, there is more ridership on the buses.
Yes.
Or at least after the consolidation, maybe not because of.
May I add, though, we
Sure.
have asked and have yet to receive quantifiable evidence to that effect. But go on.
I suppose that's true. Someone I know wondered if the reason we're now getting school buses with tinted windows is because they don't want us to see how few kids there are on them.
It just seems like those hotel courtesy buses would be fine, you know. But
You have to. I understand that they have to accommodate for the maximum number. And if there happens to be a day when there is no soccer after school,
Right.
or where the parents aren't caravanning through to pick up kids, then maybe the buses would be necessary.
well, that's a good answer. I'm going to move on to the Steve Angers, your budget committee colleague, suggested doing a budget cap.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So why not just do a budget cap? Just boom, you know, suggest a budget cap, or have the voters put in a budget cap.
I think that's what's going to happen. I think voters are, and he happens to be one of them. The budget committee is not going to propose one, but there will probably be one, almost certainly be one proposed.
You mean like in a special article? you think?
Well, it would have to be a petitioned
That's right.
article.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Is Steve going to do that, or do you know?
I presume, yes. I think he said so at the
Yeah.
at the meeting.
Yep.
Would you support that? Would the budget committee support it? It's not your role. Well, I guess, no, you do recommend special.
We
articles.
recommend
Yes,
articles,
we now
we
have
do.
the authority
Right.
to recommend anything that could
Yeah.
have any
Right.
budgetary impact.
Right, right.
And we talked about it the other night, at which point I said, the only thing I would be concerned about is that departments might use the limit on
Right.
increasing their budgets to increase it more than was necessary.
Wow.
And that could happen. I mean, at least 20 odd years ago under Harry Benson, I think it was, we had one school budget that increased 0.16%. And if you were able under the consumer price index to raise it, say 3.5, well, that would be 3.34 more than you needed. But in general, I see nothing wrong with a tax cap. It can be overridden by a super majority. I think 60% in an SB2 town. And if there were a serious, a real emergency, I think 60% of people would.
Yeah. Peter, do you have a quick thought on the budget cap?
I do. I'm going to add to Bill's notion that one of the tenets of the cap, as I understand it, I'm still getting caught up with it. It's new legislation, and I've been reading and listening. But the CPI that Bill mentions, there's two indices that are available for choice that have to be incorporated into how the tax cap is constructed.
It's a tax cap or a budget? It's a budget cap.
Well, it's really a spending cap. To
Yeah.
call it a tax cap is a bit of a misnomer. Yeah,
right.
to be clear.
Okay.
Though someone pointed out that if the CPI were to go to 10%, would we be okay with a 10% increase? Because that's one of the moving pieces of the spending cap, as we're now calling it. And to which, my first thought is, wow, but at the same time, I would imagine that with that sort of inflationary pressure, that the rationale for raising the budget accordingly would probably be there, acceptable. I will say, I was a little surprised the other evening when during the meeting, we deferred discussion about the tax cap as a budget committee 2 times before we finally met and spoke about it the other evening. After the second of 2 school presentations, I was a little surprised when the member school representative made the comment that he thought that talking about the budget cap at budget committee level was a waste of time. And I didn't think so. And in fact, I was eager for members to engage, to listen, to participate. I learned several things that I hadn't picked up and things that I had read thus far. So I thought that was great value. On its face, I think that the tax cap is a good idea. I'm still evaluating as to whether for sure I would support it.
How does the budget committee, I guess one of the ideas is, and I don't know if this money's been appropriated yet, about changing the front of the building, have the entrance go around the back, for safety reasons, right?
Yes.
So how would the budget committee, have you talked about that yet?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I guess there's a like $80,000 study first.
Oh, more than that. 200 and something.
Well, I'll break it down for you because I just, if I may.
Sure.
Yeah, but okay, but
We've spent 50 already
okay.
for
That's right.
preliminary
So
information.
just back it up though. The idea of doing that is why? Changing the back.
Well, it depends on whom you ask. Early on, I heard that it was for security reasons. Later, the other night, we heard that it began as a matter of convenience, more or less.
What's more convenient? I mean, it's by the
Well,
parking?
you can see people coming in where they now, where most of the kids come in. But Mike DiGregorio said that they finally decided that they would tie it into the security issue, and that it would make it worth passing or worth doing then. The implication was that the school board didn't think it was worth doing when it was just a matter of convenience.
Because it is kind of weird is that like the front of the building isn't, because so many kids take their own cars to the
Right.
school. They come in the back now.
Yeah, they all do.
Right.
Well, I think they always did. I mean,
Okay,
that's
every
correct.
time I've
Yeah.
been up there, you came in the back of the building.
Right.
And so they knew that then. I mean, it was just another instance of a school board decision that a new school board thinks was wrong and wants to spend a lot of money to correct. Someone suggested at our discussion on Wednesday night what I had been thinking for quite some time. Why not just build a sidewalk around the building, block the back doors during the from the outside during the school day, and have a sidewalk to go around the building, because they're concerned that kids who do come in the front now from the parking lot have to walk on the road
Oh.
When they show up late, for instance.
when they show up late.
right.
Well, if they all had to do that, they'd still come in the front and they'd get a little exercise too. But when you have an evening meeting, say, then open up the back.
I mean, it doesn't, I don't know. I mean, because to make the mechanic lead or the construction to do that, it'd be a lot of money, right? It's like a couple $1 million, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know how much, but it would.
We don't know.
They're looking at, was it almost $250,000 just to
That's what I was just
study
going
it?
to add. They've spent 50 out of the existing budget for the preliminary Gale report.
Right.
One of the warrant articles on the warrant for April will include another $214,000 for what was described by the administration as a bid spec document. So it'll be a little more detail, and they'll provide that. And that's all pre-construction. That's without lifting a finger. And I'm a little bothered by this, the ghost of bad decisions and of value engineering issues from days gone by, that we're still dealing with this.
Right. Windows, roofs. Yeah. So do you think is the budget committee going to take a stand, a recommendation on this particular article?
Oh,
about
sure.
What do you think? It's going to pass muster with the
Again,
budget
I don't know. The budget committee is and always has been divided into three groups. Those that
the
are
smart ones and the not so smart ones?
No.
well,
And which group are you guys in?
different groups try to phrase it that way, I think. People who are generally and almost unanimously in favor of any spending.
Right. Either way.
Yes,
School or
those who
town.
are opposed to any spending, and those of us who are in favor of, frankly, 95% of the spending, but have reservations about the other 5%. And this year, it's hard to tell. I know that our school board representative made a valiant effort to get a school supporter on the committee, and he succeeded. But how many others have come in sort of in mufti, I don't know.
All right. So we have 2 minutes left. How about predictions? What do you think the budget committee is going to, in round numbers, what do you think you will suggest for cuts to the school board?
Go ahead first,
Because of what I just said.
No, but how much?
I have no idea. It could be zero. I don't know what people are going to vote for. Are you wondering what amounts
Well,
people might suggest?
Suggest.
Well, I
right.
guess I'm asking what you think, because it's 2.5. The budget's up $2 million, and then the special articles are up $2 million, right? And this is a budget that's not kicking in for a while.
Yeah, this
right.
budget's up about 2.25 million.
Because someone on the school board said, hey, the budget is going to go up $1 million or $2 million every year, like it or not.
I'm sure that they feel that way, but others can see enough fat in the budget to cut a million of it easily. I mean, last year I came up with 9 or 10 positions that seemed superfluous, and I think still are, that approached $1 million. The problem with that is knowing who is going to reflexively support the school budget. We're talking about just school, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
town as well. And I don't know.
Peter, go ahead. You got to finish.
Well, I was just going to say that there is a sea change in the school board attitude about their budgets over
Meaning what?
In the past, school boards were concerned about expense as well as education. Bob Couts, back in 1979, said that the job of the school board is provide the best possible education to the youth of Conway that is financially feasible. Those 4 words have disappeared from the school board ethic. They are not concerned about how much it costs. They're concerned primarily about their narrow constituency.
Peter?
And I will
predictions, or what do you
quickly
think?
say, within our rank and file, there is definite concern about the burgeoning school budget. While the operating budget may be difficult to tackle, I do think that the CRFs, especially the 2 new CRFs that are proposed,
CRFs are
capital reserve funds, that are proposed that will be used for future building maintenance and safety, which that would be a whole nother hour-long conversation with you to go down that road. I don't think that they're going to find the support, at least amongst our board members, that would be favorable. Town, I think we haven't seen the warrant articles. I'm not going to make a prediction, but I think everybody's doing a very good job of looking hard at these budgets, and I do think that there are some areas that some adjustments can be made. I can't, off the top of my head, think of any additions. Perhaps the welfare line item, which we've talked about before on the town side, but I can think of several things I know I've been working on that would be potential recommendations for reductions, both on the town and the school.
Like the airport.
Which
Not
airport?
just because it's the airport, but because it's in the budget now.
Yeah, and you know why they located the airport in Freiburg?
Why's that?
Because that's where the planes land.
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't when they did it.
Well, wasn't it the case that the airport, when there was an airport at Settlers Green, that would often be closed because of wind problems?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, it was tiny. Right.
Small too, yeah. It wasn't room for an
All right, we got to go. Thank you, guys.
Sure,
Peter,
thank you.
Bill.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mark.